When the Fellowship reached Path Gallon, Aragorn got everyone together in order to plan their next move. The main point of discussion was the fate of the Fellowship. Would they split up? Who would accompany Frodo to Mordor? And where would the others go? The discussion ends up being pointless. Frodo wanders off, Boromir attempts to take the ring from him, and Saruman's orcs end up killing him and abducting Merry and Pippin. But what if things turned out differently? And what would happen if the Fellowship did follow Aragorn's plan? On the morning of the 26th of February, the Fellowship arrived at Path Gallon, a pleasant little lawn beneath the hill of Amon Hen, on the borders of Gondor. They couldn't continue any further by boat for now because the Falls of Rauros stood before them, so it was now that a decision would have to be made in regards to the fate of the Fellowship. Would they take the road to Gondor either by foot or by carrying the boats down the north stairs next to the falls? Or would they immediately strike eastwards across Emyn Muil towards Mordor? Would they split up, or would they continue on as a group? This is the question that Aragorn poses to the group, and as Frodo is the ring bearer, Aragorn gives him ultimate leave to decide. This is a difficult decision, so Frodo asks for an hour alone to think on it. He wanders off, although he is not supposed to move out of earshot. While he is gone, the others discuss the options. While Legolas and Gimli both vote to go to Minas Tirith, they both say they will not abandon Frodo regardless of his choice. Sam, Merry, and Pippin are also adamantly against leaving Frodo. Unsurprisingly, the only member of the Fellowship who has made it clear that they're going to Minas Tirith regardless of the choice of the others is Boromir. Aragorn actually comes up with a proposal at this time which is certainly not without opposition. He says that there's no reason for the entire Fellowship to go to Mordor, because realistically, taking extra people won't make it any less dangerous. He proposes that Frodo should take 3 companions, himself, Sam, and Gimli. He doesn't give any reasons, but we can guess. Sam is Frodo's most loyal companion, Aragorn is somewhat familiar with the lands around Mordor, so he's the guide, and Gimli, as a dwarf, is tough as nails and has a lot of natural resistance against the corruption of the One Ring. He says that the others should go with Boromir to Minas Tirith, or at the very least, Merry and Pippin should if Legolas is unwilling to abandon the rest of the Fellowship. Merry and Pippin are completely against the idea, and believe that they should even stop Frodo from going to Mordor. At this point, Sam jumps in and says that there's no real question that Frodo will choose Mordor over Minas Tirith, because going to Minas Tirith would be pointless, no offense to Boromir. At this moment, the rest of the Fellowship realizes that Boromir is missing. This is one of the real minor plot holes in the Lord of the Rings, because Boromir has actually been gone for at least over an hour at this point, and not even Aragorn or Legolas noticed. And as fate would have it, no one got a chance to follow through with Aragorn's plan. Frodo was meant to be gone for an hour, but because Boromir went and scared him off, it's now been several hours. The morning is almost over. When Boromir somewhat admits to what happened, Merry and Pippin run off in search of Frodo. Aragorn decides that the rest should split up in pairs to search, and that Boromir should go after Merry and Pippin to make sure nothing happens to them. While searching, 2 of the groups are attacked by orcs from Isengard, Legolas and Gimli, and Boromir, Merry, and Pippin. Boromir is slain, and Merry and Pippin are captured. The thing is that this attack was not guaranteed. The orcs found Merry and Pippin about a mile away from Path Gallon because they were shouting Frodo's name for everyone to hear. Legolas and Gimli encountered orcs because they ended up on the western side of Amon Hen, most likely directly in the path of the oncoming orcs. If the Fellowship stayed at Path Gallon, the orcs might not have found them so easily. Also, if Boromir didn't scare Frodo off, and if Frodo came back in an hour like he promised, the Fellowship might have left and gotten an hour or 2 head start on the orcs, either by crossing the lake or by taking the north stair down Rauros, a path I'm not sure the orcs would have even known about. So, assuming we have these minor changes, let's talk about what might have happened if the Fellowship followed Aragorn's plan. Now, like with so many what-if scenarios, there would be a huge amount of changes. I'm just going to focus on the major ones, otherwise we get stuck forever with every little thing. So, Aragorn's plan. Frodo, Sam, Aragorn and Gimli go to Mordor, and Boromir, Legolas, Merry and Pippin go to Minas Tirith. There's already some major differences in this scenario. Boromir is not killed, and Merry and Pippin are not captured, meaning there's no need for Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli to pursue them into Rohan. This also means that they do not meet Gandalf the White, and they don't end up aiding Theoden against Isengard. Let's talk about that for a second. During the Fellowship's time in Rohan, Gandalf is undoubtedly the main actor. He's the one who decides to go to Edoras, he's the one who heals Theoden, he's the one who advises Theoden to take refuge in Helm's Deep, and he's the one who rallies together the survivors from the Fords of Isen to help lift the siege. During this time, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli are valuable as soldiers, and Aragorn is valuable as an advisor, but realistically, their presence in Rohan wasn't completely necessary. Things could have played out mostly the same way if they were absent, provided Gandalf continues to play his part. But there is a huge deviation, and a huge problem if Aragorn is not present in Rohan. After the parley with Saruman, Aragorn encounters the Grey Company at the Fords of Isen, the Grey Company being his kinsman, Halbarad, 30 other Rangers of the North, and Elladan and Elrohir, the sons of Elrond. They bring a message from Elrond telling Aragorn not to forget about the Paths of the Dead. So if Aragorn isn't there because he's going to Mordor, he cannot take the Paths of the Dead and rally the Oathbreakers. The Oathbreakers were incredibly important during the war. Their presence alone drove off the invaders of southern Gondor and allowed Aragorn and his men to take control of the Corsair fleet. Also, no Aragorn in Rohan means he doesn't reveal himself using the Palantir. So Sauron may have actually delayed his invasion a while longer. That also kind of changes things massively. So what then happens with Aragorn and his crew, Gimli, Frodo, and Sam? At first, it should go reasonably well. Aragorn is familiar with the lands, even the Dead Marshes, so getting to Mordor wouldn't be a big issue. To Mordor, I repeat. Getting into Mordor is another matter entirely, because unless Aragorn knows a secret path that Gollum doesn't, which I don't count on, then it's either the Black Gate or Cirith Ungol. Aragorn probably knows about Cirith Ungol, and even if he doesn't know about Shelob, like Faramir, he'd probably know that something bad lives there, so he might be against that path. That just leaves the Black Gate, and I'm not sure how possible that way is either. The important key when it came to Mordor was always Gollum. Could he still be captured and used as a guide? Maybe, but he was only captured because he dared to get close enough to Frodo and Sam because he knew they were alone and possibly thought that he could take them. He probably isn't going to take that risk if Aragorn and Gimli are around, especially Aragorn, who has captured him in the past. Now, even if Frodo and Sam have a guide in the form of Aragorn, the biggest role Gollum played was in the destruction of the One Ring itself. He tripped and fell into the fire once taking back possession of his precious because he'd sworn on it, and Frodo's conditions were that if he laid a hand on him, he'd fall into the fire. Basically, Gollum broke an oath, and that was his punishment, and fortunately, the One Ring went with him. That means that even if Aragorn and Gimli as guides and protectors manage to get Frodo into Mordor and to Mount Doom, they're still missing the key ingredient, the way in which the One Ring falls into Mount Doom. If anything, Aragorn and Gimli being there would only complicate things further, because while both are fairly resistant to the One Ring, neither is immune, and in Sammath Naur, no one would be able to willingly throw the thing into the fire unless you were named Tom Bombadil. So while Aragorn and Gimli would be useful at times, their presence would probably deny the very narrow circumstances which allowed the One Ring to actually be destroyed. They were far more useful elsewhere. What about our other group? I think any circumstance in which Boromir makes it back to Minas Tirith alive and without the One Ring is probably a positive. His survival would have a positive effect on Denethor, and on the defense of the kingdom, because while Faramir was extremely capable himself, Boromir's martial skills were still better, and he was a source of great inspiration for the men of Gondor. I'm not sure the presence of Legolas and the hobbits would have made a huge impact beyond, oh cool, an elf is here, because elves rarely came to Minas Tirith during these years, and oh cool, some halflings, you guys must be princes of your land. That last one isn't a hypothetical, that's what straight up happened when Pippin was in Minas Tirith. But even if Boromir being back as the captain of Gondor would be a good thing, it's not even close to being important enough to outweigh the negatives from the other members of the Fellowship not being where they were supposed to be. Boromir is one man, he can't hold back the forces of Mordor alone. So things at Osgiliath and the retreat across the Pelennor would probably play out largely the same. Assuming Gandalf plays his part correctly, the Rohirrim should still arrive to break the siege. But then, instead of Aragorn and his reinforcements, the actual Corsairs of Umbar arrive, and the Battle of Pelennor Fields is a defeat. Even worse, if Merry isn't with Éowyn, then they don't kill the Witch King of Angmar. This means that even if the One Ring is somehow still destroyed, it's not before Minas Tirith has been lost, and much of Gondor has been put to the sword. The only way this changes is if, assuming Sauron takes longer to invade because Aragorn doesn't reveal himself in the Palantir, the One Ring is destroyed before Sauron invades, which is the perfect scenario, except it's incredibly unlikely, and even more unlikely because without Aragorn's suicidal attack at the Black Gate, the Ringbearer getting across Mordor becomes a lot more difficult. You see my problem with doing what-if scenarios right here. So yeah, it's probably fairly obvious by now that Aragorn's plan would have ended with things far worse. That's not because of poor judgment, it's just beyond any mortal to predict and plan things when there's so many variables at play. For things to have ended up as great as they did, characters needed to be in the right place at the right time to play roles that they may have never suspected to have played. For example, Aragorn needed to be doing side quests, well, sort of side quests, in Rohan so that he could be in position to take the paths of the dead. Gollum needed to swear on the One Ring and then be there at the crack of doom so that he could make the ultimate unwilling sacrifice. If things were different, that's not to say that they wouldn't have found a way to work out, but I, like Aragorn, can't possibly predict that. I was going to finish this video off by saying we should thank Boromir because by scaring Frodo off and causing the Fellowship to split up in the way that it did, he helped ensure the conditions which allowed Sauron to be defeated. And while I'm not going to downplay Boromir's role, I actually think we should also thank Sauron. Because when Boromir tried to take the One Ring from Frodo, he was not acting like Boromir. He was under the One Ring's temporary enthrallment. The common point of Tolkien's work is that evil is ultimately self-harming and self-destructive. I like to think this is one such example. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed it or at least found it interesting. This video was requested by one of my commenters, sorry it's been a while so I don't remember your name, several times across several of my videos, so this one is for you and I hope it lived up to your expectations. I apologize if I didn't go deep enough, but as I've said a few times now, I'm not really a fan of what-if scenarios because while you can predict things to a certain degree, beyond that it really does feel like you're just making shit up. Cheers, farewell, and remember, my plan would be to go to the Winchester, have a nice cold pint, and wait for this all to blow over.